Welcome to Lesson 3 of this CUNY Classics course. Today, we will be discussing Athenian cuisine. When we think of ancient Greece, we think of philosophers, math, theater, and mythology. We tend to not imagine ancient Greeks eating pancakes for breakfast, but they did. Akratysma is the ancient Greek word for breakfast. Today, breakfast is considered to be the most important meal of the day. Many cultures take this meal very seriously and make sure to enjoy it. However, breakfast in ancient Greece was very different from the modern-day meal. In ancient Greece, breakfast would usually consist of bread with wine, more on that later, porridge, or a type of pancake with honey. It was considered a light meal, and usually only eaten by the working class, such as slaves, servants, warriors, or laborers, who needed it to get through their working day. Wealthier citizens would often have slept through the morning, having feasted and partied the night before. Lunch was yet another light meal for the Greeks. For lunch, they might eat fish, cheese, legumes, and fruit, and even some more bread. However, dinner in ancient Greece was just the opposite. For the upperclassmen in Greece, dinner was usually a social event and party. During this enjoyable meal, people often laid on their side to eat on what we would today call a chaise lounge. This was to aid digestion. Dinner was eaten around sundown to sunset. Wine in ancient Greece was a more fermented and watered-down version of what we would imagine as wine today, and it was drunk throughout the day. Wine always was present at the dinner parties. Sometimes the Greeks would even play drinking games with the provided wine. Kotobos is the oldest recorded drinking game and best understood as a combination of horseshoes and a chugging contest. The Greeks often drank wine from a large serving bowl called a kylix. The crater was used for mixing water with wine in order to dilute it. For the main course, the centerpiece of a Greek meal might be meat or game, either from farmed animals or hunting. This could include boars, pigs, lambs, goats, and chickens. Animals were often sacrificed to the gods, especially deer, and then their meat would either be eaten as part of the religious service or left for whatever god the sacrifice had been performed for. The Greeks, of course, enjoyed plenty of fish, being an island nation in the Mediterranean. Dinner would also have included legumes, olives, cheeses, breads, figs, and any vegetable they could grow. It's very interesting to note that vegetarianism existed in ancient Greece. The most famous vegetarian of all was a man named Pythagoras, whose theory you've probably heard of. The Greek family did not eat together as a whole. Rather, men and women ate their meals apart. Men would have often had their fellow male friends over for the dinner festivities. They would eat, drink, talk, play drinking games, and regular games for hours on end. The women were not allowed to join the men, unless they were a slave or a prostitute. The Greeks ate some foods that will seem strange and quite unappetizing to the world today. The Greeks often enjoyed eels, small birds, and locusts. One of the most peculiar things that they partook in was a dish referred to as black soup. Black soup was made from pig's blood, vinegar, and salt. The Greeks usually used their hands to eat their food. They rarely used spoons. The Greeks usually used their hands to eat their food. They rarely used spoons, but would use bread to soak up broths. However, they had knives used to cut up their meat. The ancient Greeks grew olives, grapes, figs, and wheat, and kept goats, which were used to produce milk and cheese. It is believed that only 20% of the land in ancient Greece was used for farming. It is very interesting that almost all of their diet comes from crops. Most of the land did not have soil, and the soil that was present was full of rocks and pebbles, meaning it was useless for farming. In the month of October, the crops that were grown would be planted, and then in May, the Greeks would harvest the grain. Farms in ancient Greece were small and generally only had about 5 acres of land. Farmers would grow their own food to feed their family, and then they would sell the crops to make a living. Tools that the farmers had were plows, oxen, sickles, and even more. Farmers could purchase or try to make their own tools for their farms. The main crop in ancient Greece was barley. Barley was an essential crop for ancient Greek farmers because it was an ingredient that could be used for making different foods that were crucial for the Greeks, such as flour for bread, porridge, and even wine. A fun fact that I found very interesting while researching the cuisine of ancient Greece was, today, modern Greeks throw flowers to celebrate, instead of smashing their dishes on the ground. This symbolism of smashing plates is said to have been started in ancient Greece. Smashing plates has been used to signify the end and the beginning to drive off spirits. It's very fascinating that a small act done so long ago is still an ever-present action in today's society. Thank you so much for watching. Join us next week for a lesson on women's lives in ancient Greece.